Welcome to the Decode Podcast with Elias Malfovan, Daniel Stanfill, and Sean Kincaid.
Welcome to a special edition of the Decode Podcast. We are in Kansas at the SMTA Star event, and we have a couple of guests today. Mr. Mike Konrad, a familiar face to probably most of our listeners. And we have Dr. Adam Klett from Kaizen, probably a familiar face too. He's got some good LinkedIn videos. So, gentlemen, thank you for joining us. And looking forward to this chat because I think this is the first time we've ever had 5 people on.
Yeah, so you promised us a happy hour when this is over, so that's why we're here.
Okay, well, we better go fast then.
Let's go. Let's go.
So, thanks for joining us. I understand you're giving a little talk tomorrow. Can you give a preview?
Me? Yeah. Yes, I am giving a little talk tomorrow. I'll be talking about a technique called Electrochemical Impedance Spectroscopy, or EIS.
That's what I know I was going to talk about.
Rolls right off the tongue.
I know, and it does. It's just so. It's a new tech. It's not a new technique to the world of science, right? People have been doing EIS, but within the electronics manufacturing industry, it has new applications. It's used a lot to characterize chemical systems like batteries and charging systems and things like that, electrochemical systems. But as far as the electronics manufacturing industry is concerned, it's kind of like a new version of SIR.
And I certainly know what that is because I just listened to a fantastic talk on cleaning. But for the people who didn't have the benefit of Mike's talk, can you go into SIR a little bit for us, Mike?
Yeah, surface
Insulation resistance.
Thank you. I thought I was thinking of happy hour.
Thank you.
Yeah. Actually, I was trying to think of something snarky to say, but it didn't come, which is unusual. Must be late.
Yes.
It's surface insulation resistance test. So basically, it measures the electrical resistance between two known points on an assembly. And if there needs to be a minimal amount of resistance, like a lot of resistance, 1 times 10 to the 8th ohms. And if there is less than 1 times 10 to the 8th ohms, then the board is considered to have failed the SIR tests. Now that number might vary depending on industry and application, but the generic number is 1 times 10 to the 8th.
What does a failed SIR test mean in the field? Like if that product were to make it into product, if it were actually go out the door and into an actual product to be used by people.
Yeah. The SIR test is designed to mimic, it's basically designed to be a time machine. So it artificially advances the age of the board by subjecting it to heat and humidity under a bias for a week. So it's a 168-hour test minimum. Some auto industry boards, when they're in development, are up to 1,000 hours. I've even heard of a case where it's like a 5,000-hour test, which is, I guess that's life or death, fail-safe stuff. But typically, us mere mortals, we subject boards in a harsh environment under a stress load for 168 hours. And the idea is that a board needs to be clean enough. The enough is new. So in September of 2018, IPC changed the standard, the cleanliness standard. They took our number away. Our number, which was based on a resistivity of solvent ROSE test, was 10. And if you live in the metric world, or you live in the rest of the world, 1.56 micrograms per centimeter squared, or 10 micrograms per square inch of sodium equivalent. And, 10 was pass, 10.01, was fail, right? It was, and those numbers were developed in the 1970s and have long needed to be updated.
Yeah.
And it was somewhat of a subjective number. Someone thought, okay, well, that's not too clean, not too dirty. It's kind of Goldilocks, just right kind of number. But it didn't ask the question, where does a board go? What is the cost of failure? What is the climactic in-use environment? What are the standoff heights? What's the density? Because back in the 70s, everything was about the same in terms of density and standoff heights. So IPC came up with the most frustrating and the most absolutely wonderful standard. So the question, your IPC, Adam, how clean do my boards have to be? Or IPC, how clean do my boards have to be?
Well, you tell me.
And Base it on, like, prove it. Yes, exactly. You heard the script.
Yep.
So the answer to how clean is clean enough is you tell me and prove it.
Now,
And then they give a whole protocol of how to prove.
from like a manufacturing standpoint, what would be the root? All right, so we have the failure if it fails, right? What would be a root cause to have that happen?
So the SIR in particular, it's a ionic cleanliness test. So the idea is that when you apply this voltage across the pattern, there's a special comb pattern that was developed, and there's a special spacing in the finger width and everything like that. When the resistance across that pattern drops, it's because there's some sort of either leakage currents or there's ionic contamination on the surface that's causing electrochemical migration, which is the failure part. But we don't want electrochemical migration, right? Like Mike said, it's a I probably wouldn't have used the term time machine, but it's a good way of, it's like a stress test, right? So we want to try to grow these dendrites to see if the board's dirty. If the board's dirty, if it has ionic contamination on it, it will grow these dendrites.
That environment, and it absolutely entice those.
Right. And it's kind of like what Mike talked about today. All the flux residues is one, what are the usual suspect is
The
one
usual suspects.
of the suspects.
Flux
right?
and everything else.
But there's all the other, like, think about when you manufacture the boards, there's, a plethora of different sources of contamination. Like everything that it touches, or everything that touches it, all tooling aids, all the people, all of the other materials that it touches are potential sources.
All the conveyors.
Yeah, anything, right, can be a potential source of
The
contamination.
last stage of PCB fab is actually board washing. So you get any burrs out from the router or any. Yes, but we always just used water.
Yeah.
We never used the cleaner with it, and it was just water and drying.
Yeah. Well, the purpose of that wash is really more to get the foreign object debris, the FOD,
Yeah, that's it.
the remnants of the pieces of the fab process. It's not necessarily designed to remove ionic contamination because it just isn't. Boards that come from the best fab shops anywhere don't come in perfectly clean. If you were to just take a roast tester, for example, resistivity solvent extract test, and test a bare board, take it right out of the package, right out of the dry box,
Right out of the seal.
tuck their gloves,
Uh-huh.
test it. You're going to measure something.
Really?
You're not going to be zero. Almost never. You'll measure something. And that something is not enough to cause a problem. But a lot of people falsely think that, okay, as long as they don't add anything to the board during the assembly process, which is like impossible, should not add something, but assuming it's still going to have contamination. So you're not starting at zero. The baseline is measurable. And then you're just adding stuff on top of what the board fabrication process did. Because if you think about it, board fab process is way dirtier from a chemical standpoint than the assembly process.
Sure.
The assembly process is done sometimes in clean room environments or near clean room environments, very sterile, very ESD safe, very clean. And, chemicals are limited in certain areas. The board fab shop, you're drilling, you're pressing, you're laminating, you're heating, you're etching, you're plating,
All different chemical
all in one building, right? And I'm sure you can go to sleep at night and smell the chemicals that are used in board fab.
Sure.
Because you grew up in board fab.
Yeah.
So there's a scent to it, right?
It equated to it feels like I went from blue collar to white collar when I got into PCBA. It's
It's a good analogy.
It's a totally different animal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this blue collar produces,
Yeah.
It's subjected to a lot of stuff.
Big thing.
And most of it comes off. The boards are clean enough, but it's not zero.
So is that almost like how like Dale Lee was talking in his talk today about tolerances and how you have to factor in the tolerance at every level, the tolerance of the component, the tolerance of the board, the tolerance of everything, right? To actually get to a real number that tells you where your process is at. Should we be working on the same thing with cleanliness, where you factor in every step where you have a potential introduction of a new contaminant to where you can monitor how much you're introducing?
I don't think so. And I think the reason is because you need to clean. If you're going to be cleaning, it doesn't matter if the board came in dirty or how clean the board was. I mean, you're still cleaning. So it's not like we're keeping a tally of, okay, the board came in with this much, we added this much for this, and then we have to clean a certain amount of that.
Yeah, we don't say, I'm just going to clean a little bit. Well, it's not that dirty.
It doesn't matter how much is there or where it came from, right? You're clean.
Cleaning is a go big, go home process. It is one of the few processes where it's like you can't be a little pregnant. You either are or you aren't. You're either clean or you're not. Yeah. And to make matters even worse, a partially clean board is way dirtier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a technical, way dirtier.
Because that's distributed the...
And you've added chemicals like, Kaizen chemical or whoever's chemical on it, which are absolutely vital to clean the board, to solubilize the residues, both polar and nonpolar. But leave those chemicals on and they cause trouble, right? They're like teenagers with nothing to do at night, right? They just start vandalizing, the street. They just vandalize the board in the form of etching the components, etching the board and, attacking the metal and doing all that. So, and the chemicals, ironically, the job of the chemical is to remove all the ionic and other residue. Mm-hmm. And the chemical itself is highly ionic. So it needs to come off. Right. And it needs to come off as soon as you're done with the wash. Then go right into rinse. And rinsing is, extremely critical. So that's why I'm saying it's all or nothing. It's go big, go home. Don't try and partially clean a board and then say, I don't have time for 6 rinses. I'm just going to run 2 and get out of here.
I want to jump back to what we opened with. Give me that acronym.
The EIS, Electrochemical Impedance Spectroscopy.
Okay, so EIS.
Mm-hmm.
That's the right way to say it.
You're the only one at the table that can even say that. So perfect.
Spell it.
We'll see you later tonight if you
I
can
can
say
spell
it.
EIS.
So it's a novel application of an existing test process.
Yeah. So the idea is in an SIR test, you apply 5 volts. It's a DC test.
So is this
Steady current the whole time?
Yes.
Is this in addition to kind of the currently established testing process in place of, or what is that?
So the reason I kind of call it the SIR
2.0?
2.0, not necessarily SIR.
Not literally, but
it's
1.1.
It's very similar in the sense that it's an electrical test. We're applying a voltage and we're measuring a current and we're doing something with that. So we're either calculating a resistance. In the case of SIR, we apply voltage, we measure the current, and then we use Ohm's law to calculate the resistance and whether that falls above or below some value, right, it passes or fails. With EIS, what we're doing is we're applying an AC voltage, so it's an oscillating voltage, and we measure an oscillating current out the other side.
So, I'm sorry, is that more
Signal integrity?
Is that more mimicking the actual life cycle of a product where it isn't? It might not just be on.
So it's not like a fluctuation, a life cycle, like a cycling. No, it's a signal. It's a alternating signal, and instead of calculating a resistance, so you take your voltage divided by current, your resistance. In the AC version of the tests, you calculate an impedance. So then you can take, that's where the EIS comes from. It's electrochemical impedance spectroscopy. The really cool thing about the impedance is that it's a function of frequency. So you can do this measurement over many different frequencies, and you can calculate the impedance across all these different frequency values. And
Instead of just at a constant 5 volts.
Right. And then there's so much more information.
When you say different frequencies, you're changing the hertz? Like
yes,
from 60 hertz to 50 hertz, 30 whatever, 120 hertz or whatever.
Yep.
Interesting.
Exactly. Typical systems get up to like a megahertz. Couple megahertz, yeah.
Wow.
It depends on what you're doing, right? So certain chemical reactions and certain phenomena happen at different time scales. The idea is that you're probing what's happening at the surface of the board. So different phenomena. So you talked about it in your talk, where when you have electrochemical migration, where you have the board on one side, at the anode, the metal dissolves, it comes into an ion, and then it diffuses across, and then it has to get plated on the other side. Well, each of those parts happens at different time scales, right? So for example, diffusion is very slow compared to the chemical reaction that occurs once it gets to the other side. So at the lower frequencies, I'm essentially probing the current associated with the diffusion of those ions.
Process. Yeah.
At the higher frequencies, I'm probing the charge transfer mechanisms that are happening at the electrode at the end. So I can kind of
Getting a broader picture.
getting more information about what's happening on the surface of the board. Yeah.
And the application of EIS in our space, is that your brainchild?
No, I cannot claim. I cannot claim that.
Because there's no fact checkers.
So we'll know when he starts calling it the atom test.
Once we post this, AI will gather that data and should become a ST. I did.
Adam Klett invented.
Is it an environmental stress test? Is it under a heat and humidity?
Yeah, so it's
like
yep,
SIR?
yes,
So same environment.
Same environments. Yep, exactly.
Same duration.
Exact same environment.
It's so and you can even use the exact same test coupon, the same patterns, the same comb patterns. So EIS, like I mentioned, it has been around for decades. Like people use it in chemistry labs to characterize different chemical systems.
Sure.
I learned about it in grad school. I actually used the technique when I was in grad school to characterize the polymer system I was working on. Right, it had its own applications.
Yeah, everybody's done that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I mean it's
Classic.
classic graphical problems. But the applications in the electronics manufacturing world, I found papers back to like the early 2010s, like 2015, 2012-ish, talking about it. But there's not many people doing it.
There's not actual application of it.
Well, think of it this way: there's no IP standard. There's no IPC standard that calls out its use. I mean, so it's yet.
So you kind of have to, IPC's, purposely late to the party.
Right.
It has to be
established.
It has to be argued and delegated. And, you've got to have 8 months of meetings or 8 years of meetings or 80 years of meetings. And I say that in a bit facetious, but in a good way, because every country gets heard from.
Yeah.
And then eventually makes its way, when we run out of objections, it makes its way to a standard.
Right. That was the beautiful thing where you're interviewing John Mitchell when he was like, if you have a problem with the standard, join the committee.
Yeah, why don't you, if you have something to complain about, do that at the committee so your opinion can be heard and we can make a better standard.
People do.
Yeah.
They're very vocal at some of these committee meetings, and you're just wondering if a bar fight's going to break out. But so for the audience sake, you're with Kaizen. One of the founders of Kaizen also owns Magnalytics, which makes SIR testers. Do you envision that this new testing methodology would be incorporated into one of those existing machines, or is it a whole different machine?
Possible. So it's used. It would be used in a different. It would be used for a different purpose. So right now, SIR is used. It's one of the only techniques. Actually, it's interesting. If you go through all the IPC documents of all the different analytical methods you can use for quantifying cleanliness, right? You pretty much have ROSE, IC, and SIR. Mm-hmm. And of the three, did I miss anything? No, I think that's. You get ROSE, IC, SIR.
There are tests, but the ones that are
called out.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are. Like C3 is an example,
which is another form of. That C3 is a combination of ROSE, because it's extraction.
Yep.
And IC on chromatography, because they send the sample in. You guys if you want to get us a table, we'll join you.
This is exactly what I envisioned when we signed these guys up, right? It was like, because you got the guy that's...
All we have to do is do the kindling and the fire will burn itself.
Yeah, that's perfect.
But yeah, so you got those three, ROSE, IC, and SIR. And of those three, SIR is the only one that you're allowed to use for qualifying a process, right? You can't use IC data or ROSE data. That's not considered objective evidence. But you have to, SIR is the only one, unless you have historical data. There's other
loopholes.
We'll call them loopholes.
But they're hard.
But pretty much SIR is the only method that you can use for qualifying a cleaning process.
Okay.
Now, probably that changed a bit with the, Mike talked about, they took the definition away, right? There was a quantified number, and that's changed to
you prove it.
It's good enough, and you have
certain things changed in terms of ROSE testing. One is they took the pass-fail number away, right, which is 10 or 1.56 for ROSE, and they took they devalued. They reassigned ROSE's purpose.
Okay.
ROSE's purpose is this board clean? And
the process control.
And it was defined as clean if it was below those numbers. And they said, okay, the numbers are gone. and your role. Thank you, Rose, for all your 50 years of service. We don't need you anymore in this role, but this guy wants to hire you desperately, and that was process monitoring. And it actually is quite synergistic with other test methods like SIR, because SIR is great because it will put your board under the same stress conditions it would see in the real world, and it will objectively determine if your board is clean.
Sure.
And because it's not based on anything except a resistance value, it's quite objective. And then the reason Rose stuck around, I think, was twofold. One, it was designed in the 70s. It's been around a long time. There are, quite millions of data points, that we have a historical record with Rose. And at some point, the actual production assembly needs to be looked at.
Ooh.
Whether it's a perfect test or not, it needs to be looked at. Because, as I said earlier today, you set up a golden board, you do your qualification with SIR, everything comes out great. You're wearing clean underwear that day, ironed your socks. The board, the machine has just been calibrated. Everything is brand new. And
It's not the real world.
not even a dirty thought in your head, right? And you do your qualification, you pass SIR with flying colors, and then you never test again, right? What if your process varied? We showed today in my talk that if the reflow profile was off by just 5%,
A couple of percent, yeah.
it failed SIR.
Right.
Well, you'll never SIR again, ever, unless you have a different project or you made significant changes to yours, and you never have to do that SIR again.
If you have a zone that's still showing right, but it's not actually hitting that point, then you're never even going to know that that's happening.
The guard at the gate, the last gate that boards go through, the guard at the gate is some kind of ionic contamination test. It doesn't tell you what it is. It doesn't tell you where it is, but it will say, hey, Adam,
Something about the process has changed.
has more contamination on it than the board that passed SIR did. Doesn't mean it's dirty. It doesn't mean it's fail. It means it's different.
There's a very
Something changed in the process.
I think it's more of a process indicator than right? Because
It's not cleanliness.
it's just, well, that's when the way that you calculate those upper and lower limits is by basically running a bunch of boards and doing a bunch of measurements and then calculating an average.
Yep.
Or standard deviation, basically.
Standard deviation.
Giving yourself a
You
window.
understand that as we took Mean Six Sigma.
There you go.
Five,
There you go. You get your
Nobel.
3 sigma.
But there's, some people who aren't.
That's good. I have taken standard deviation classes, though, so I probably actually understand it just as good.
And you worked at Kawasaki, bro, right? So,
Yeah.
Well, before we get too far into the weeds, I know with you two, we could talk cleaning. I was going to say all night, but that's probably not enough time. Probably be all week. But I think we wanted to touch on a couple of other facets to Dr. Andrew. So let's talk about your SMTA involvement. I understand that you are on the global board of directors. Is that correct?
Yep.
Also,
Probably the youngest face on the board, I would imagine.
That is
be
an
hard to
accurate
beat.
statement. Yeah.
So 23, 24? But,
roughly.
We'll go with that. Yeah.
So we hear a lot of talk. We heard some more today about, kind of this delta between where most of the folks in our industry are and kind of the next round of people coming up, right? There's a huge space in between.
yes.
Common knowledge. Being a young professional in the space, what kind of activities are you involved in or programs are you involved in that would maybe motivate somebody in university or somebody even earlier than that to consider a career in this weird little world that we live in that the rest of the world really relies on, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a great question. So I would say that my involvement in the SMTA started just by coming to these events. Sure. Right. So I think my first event was probably SMTAI. It was either cleaning and coatings or an SMTAI. I don't know, 6 years ago, something like that. And
Florida Expo.
I was, actually, so
like a lean drug you're doing.
Technically, yeah. I became involved with the local chapter down in the Space Coast. So in Florida. Yep. So I got on the leadership team down there, and I started, helping plan events and things like that. It was a very strong chapter. And so it was a good experience. Got to grow my network, however small it was at the time. But then I continued to come to these, and I got to know a lot of people. I got to learn a lot. I mean, SMTA has all of the technical events that they do. They have webinars, especially during COVID. I mean, they had webinars out the what. And
they've recently made everything available to like all of the technical,
all training is included.
Awesome.
But it's a good thing. Like, I mean, that is a good thing, right? And so you can learn so much, and especially as a new engineer, or even not even engineers, even the technicians or the assemblers, right? They have content for all of those, all of those people, because they recognize that they have to learn somehow, right? And so I really appreciated that. And then at one point, Eileen suggested that I run for the board, and somehow magically got elected to the board. And so since then, I've been in charge of the young professionals initiatives that we want, because we recognize that there is that gap, and that we need younger professionals to come and be interested and be involved when you want that type of engagement. Because one, it's great to see younger faces at these events, hearing from them talk about their work. And two, they're the ones that are going to be running the industry. And
Somebody's got to take up the torch, right?
Exactly. Someone's got to do it, right? And so
that's also what's cool about the posters at SMTAI, like the students. I talked to one. I wish I remembered his name, but
I wish you did too.
I talked to one student who had one of the posters there for probably 20 minutes, and it was so fascinating, the route that he was taking and the research he had done and the advancements in the field he was going to bring. And so, I could see how valuable that would be to the industry moving forward to get those people involved.
Right. So what we're trying to do, and Mike has been involved as a part of the board, trying to figure out how to improve that value proposition for those young professionals. What do they want? What would they benefit from? What can the organization provide to them to help them, support that, right? Exactly. And so, we've come up with a handful of ideas. We've already done a lot as far as trying to reorganize the structure of, especially like the student chapters, to help make it easier for them to participate in events, trying to add more content to the knowledge base that we have, and
more importantly, we're about to roll out, I won't give it all away, but we're about to roll out a new technology that will allow you to, within seconds, access very specific information through SMTA. So if you're looking for a paper on the subject of voiding, or even narrower than that, it'll come back with all the papers, links directly to go there.
It's so valuable.
Being able to search exactly. Yep.
We've been busy, or like you and I have a gang on it, but the staff has been very busy.
Remember, there's no fact checker.
running.
We did all the work.
Every technical paper that we have, over almost 6,000 technical papers in our archive. Many of those have been put through like a learning model, and then every webinar that most of the webinars, I should say, that we've saved, we've transcribed, run those through a learning model. So we now know, even on key phrases, what webinars to find, what papers to find, what training courses offer answers to that question. So it's
that's cool.
It's a question of taking all the value which is there, but some people just don't
just
know
make
about
it more
it.
readily available.
And sometimes it's just an ominous task to go through it. I mean, it's like walking to the Library of Congress. It's like, what do we do with all this? And it's delivering parsed, researched responses to technical questions.
I know long before I ever met her, I was watching all of Chris Shea's webinars and presentations. And so like the idea of being able to find that information readily available,
it'll be quick, it'll be easy, and it'll provide you with the references So that's one of the big resources that we're trying to make available. And then obviously we pride ourselves, we try to be good mentors for students. We don't have an official mentorship program, although kind of versions of one have existed in the past. But we're always happy to have one-on-one relationships with newer members of the community to try to bring them along. I mean, that's how I was. I don't know if they dragged into the organization, but I'm very happy about it.
Sure.
And let's see what else. And then we're putting out programs at the larger events like SMTA. We have what we call the Passport program, the Passport to the World of SMT.
Yeah. Daniel was a part of it last year.
Yeah, I know. It's. I mean, we think it's great. What did you think? Did you?
Yeah, it was good. It brought a lot of people to the booth and had a lot of good conversations, especially they've got different questions, right? The young people who are coming into it and are filling out those passports and stuff, like they've got a different, fresh perspective.
Yeah. And the idea was try to put yourself into the shoes of someone who's new to the industry, just got out of school, and you've seen those rooms. I mean, it's huge. There's hundreds of booths, and it's kind of intimidating. And especially for someone who let's say engineers are stereotypically, introverted, right? And so it's hard to just walk and say, hey, Sean, tell me about how blah, 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 or whatever, ask them questions. And so we tried to come up with a program that was, it made it easy for someone to, it's expected. Like, hey, you need to walk up to these people, ask them these questions. They gain those social skills. They get the technical knowledge.
Well, what's cool too is you guys provided questions. So if I didn't have any,
right,
because you have to have some sort of a foundation of knowledge to even ask good questions, right? So if you don't have any experience in that section of the industry, then you don't even know what to ask. Exactly. So the fact that you guys provided questions for people to ask, that was really helpful.
So yeah, that was the idea. So kind of in a nutshell, those are some of the bigger things that we're trying to do. We're trying to make it easier, and we're trying to make it more valuable for the young professionals, because we said they're the future.
Yeah, and I think that's great. The social aspect of it is a big thing too, because it can be intimidating. You walk into a place, like you said, and there's tons of people around, and then you see the good old boy club, right? You see Mike come around, but he can't make it 5 feet before somebody shakes his hand. So you're like, okay, this is the cool kids club, and I'm the new guy. How do I,
Exactly.
But breaking that initial barrier down of apprehension of talking to some of the other folks in the space, you quickly find out that they really want to talk.
They're happy to
the club, right? Yeah. So I think providing that opportunity, or kind of being a liaison between, the newcomers and the established old guard, right?
So you think you discovered us? We actually discovered you. Every time we start to mentor someone, we call up our brigade and go, I got another one. They're young.
Well, speaking of social, that was one of the questions I had for Adam was, I'm wondering, you do great videos on LinkedIn. You provide a lot of helpful information in very digestible formats. So I'm curious, when you do a video like that, how much did you already know? Are any of the topics that you present in video format on LinkedIn and things that were new to you, or is this old hat? Everything you're presenting is just you could do it without a script, just whatever.
Some of the videos are. I mean, I have my subject matter expertise. Some of I either write a script or write an outline of the video beforehand. Some of the videos are easier to write than others, just because I'm more familiar with that specific topic. But I do learn a little bit every episode that I make. I mean, I do research before, just to make sure I'm not saying the wrong thing, or
because that's the quickest way to find out where you're wrong, is to post something.
Yeah.
Right.
Get all the others in. I have vibes and trolls alike. Come on.
Yeah. And I'll say I'm not immune to making a mistake every once in a while. It happens.
We're all fallible, right?
I don't know. I thought I made a mistake once, but I was wrong.
Dad joke.
That's worse. It's like a grandpa joke.
Sean, did you have anything burning in your mind that you'd like to ask Dr. Adam? I think you've said 4 words today.
So I'm just soaking it all in. I was.
You're like a sponge.
Well, because when he was talking earlier about all the different types of analysis you can get from your testing, right? Mm-hmm. He talked about anodes and he talked about plating. Mm-hmm. That was my wheelhouse. I did wet process for 15 years. And yeah, I was thinking too, like in the circuit board industry, I know this is SMTA and all that. I'm a PCB guy.
We had to SMT.
You know the fab first.
That's step one.
But you could use it for batch analysis because your anodes can go bad, right? Your copper slab depletes, right? And those copper ions go into the solution. They bond with the sulfuric acid, the brighteners, and the carriers, and they mix together to form one ion and smack it to your
That is the smartest you've ever seen.
electricity.
Was awesome.
Yeah, I invented, right? I'm sorry, yeah, no fake check. Yeah, I invented it, so I know where to talk. But the Sean method. Yeah. In that scenario, you could definitely, with the different types, and once you realize what frequency meant what, you could see if your brightener was lower, if your carrier was low, was it your sulfuric acid, was it the water that you were using, or was it your animals?
Yeah, no, I'm sure that you could use that method, and maybe
Because currently, I mean, it varies, right?
Yeah.
So now they have these balls that you stack on. You could kind of look over the tank and see if you need to add more balls, right?
But see, that's easy. That's very easy to do.
Well, the way it used to work was you'd have to lift your finger up, and if you could lift it off the bar, okay, it was time to change it, right? And then if you didn't, but it was like, yeah, you could use a scale.
Subjective there.
Yeah, lift it up.
This is the scientific approach that you've been missing.
But with that type of testing, you could, if you nailed down the frequencies and what it was feeding back, you could definitely analyze a bath real time.
I am sure that it could be.
It would eliminate the titration process almost.
Well,
If you got good enough at it.
I think that.
John, he has a PhD.
Okay.
So I love where you're going, and yes, I think
So
using some sort of electrochemical method to test the bath is my guess is that it's out there. I'm sure. Well, I'm not sure, but it's possible. Yes.
You could have real-time process monitoring.
Yes, that could be the case. And if someone out there wants to watch this and develop that system, go ahead.
like we all cells, right? So that's like a thing, but it's not a exact science of how much you should put in each one. It's kind of a gauge of where you're at.
Yeah.
Make slow additions, rehaul cells, see how that plays. Slow additions, rehaul, and then you get your, but there's no like, hey, you started at this number, and if you put this number in there, you'll get to where you want to be achieved. Certainly.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
So, I mean, I was going to say, the benefit of the methods that you use right now is that it's probably easy. It's very understanding. You don't need a degree to understand the mechanisms. Yeah, exactly. And it's quick. Now,
Well, where I was thinking you take it to is you make automatic additions based on how
like an automated.
Yes, so you would literally dispense the carry the
Conditioning the bath at all times, you're saying?
yeah, and especially when you get into like electrolysis plating where you're really dependent upon the chemicals inside of there and each tank that goes through it. That they have to titrate all day long. That's all they do, titration. So
Yeah, so I think the what I'm going to talk about tomorrow is that wouldn't work exactly.
PCB assembly,
But
I got to get on it.
no, so I love it because what you're doing is you're taking some information, learning about how it's applied in one area, and then using that information and applying it somewhere else. And that's kind of one of my mantras. I think that's awesome to be able to do that. So
I finally know.
Basically a doctor.
Oh, yeah, that's an honorary. Look how much money you save. I think
Everyone would agree.
Well, this was a great chat, and really looking forward to your talk tomorrow. And I think some other guy is going to be giving a talk too.
Forget that, but for everyone who missed Mike's today, it was awesome. So next year, don't miss out on the Star event. It's a really great event.
It's fantastic. And speaking of really great events, just want to remind folks about SMTAI in October. If you haven't already registered, go ahead and get registered, and we will be there. We will be speed casting, as we like to call it. And it's just a fantastic event. Great opportunity for networking. Great opportunity to see, new technologies, emerging materials, whatever the case is. You really don't want to miss out. And
The technical proceedings, there's a ton.
the list keeps going. So smtai.org. Go ahead and get registered, and we hope to see you there. On behalf of Daniel, Sean, Mr. Mike Konrad, and Dr. Adam Klett. I didn't say doctor.
I had him say this on Vanessa Doctor. Right?
Good. Well, thanks for tuning in. And if you enjoyed this, we encourage you to please like, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next time. Thank you.
Thanks.